What is it you want, Barry? What do you want? You want the moon? Just say the word and I'll throw a lasso around it and pull it down.
Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, dying times here.
Come with me if you want to live.
That's it, man. Game over, man. Game over.
The Force will be with you, always.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to 20th Century Geek. I'm your regular host, Scott Weatherly, and we are continuing our deep dive into the world of Ghostbusters fandom. And I'm being joined by yet another ghost head today, Devin from Channeling Spirits, the YouTube channel. How you doing, Devin? You okay?
I'm phenomenal. How are you doing, Scott? You excited?
I am. I'm very excited. I'm always good. Yeah, it's great to be talking Ghostbusters. It's been a hell of a month for it. And
yeah, I mean, we are days away from the premiere.
Yeah, have you got your tickets booked?
I do. I'm ready and rearing to go.
Yes, I've got my tickets booked. I'm very excited. It's going to be, it's genuinely, it sounds really silly. I'm genuinely nervous about it.
Is it surreal for you?
Yes. Yes, it is. It feels weird in a good way. Like, I'm not going in negative, but like, you know, I'm old enough. I was too young for the first one, but I saw the second one in the cinema. And so, like, you know, it's one of those where I'm going in and it's like, yeah, it's been a lifetime thing. So to go into this is going to be, I'm going to make it like the only thing I can think of that's going to be a close comparison is sitting down watching Force Awakens and, you know, having those characters return. And so I've got that sort of vibe at the moment. So yeah, it's all good.
Yeah, my brother was old enough to see 2. I was 2 years old, and he got through the courtroom scene, and he just looked up at my dad and was like, "Dude, I'm done. I'm too young for this." So I've seen Ghostbusters proper for the 30th anniversary. They released in cinemas, so I've seen it in cinemas.
Mm-hmm.
But technically, I've never really seen an in canon Ghostbusters film really at its release. So it's an exciting time. I grew up watching the real Ghostbusters, Extreme Ghostbusters, and just any little bit, as there were many droughts throughout the franchise and just gobbling that up. So it's very exciting, and I would say very surreal. And yeah, I think, Star Wars is another, just kind of mega franchise, and you have that trepidation, but also very much an excitement. There's desires, there's fears, there's a lot of passion and energy.
Yeah, I'm hoping to see some costumes, or at least some sort of, people coming dressed. We're sat here, I'm wearing a Ghostbusters t-shirt. You're actually wearing a flight suit. That's awesome. So, that's what I'm hoping to see when I go in on Thursday. But let's wind back a little. Firstly, before we get into the Ghostbusters, introduce yourself and your channel, because I want to talk about that a little before we start. So, Channeling Spirits.
Sure. So I'm Devin Dion. I'm the writer and editor of Channeling Spirits. So if you look up Channeling Spirits, you might find some weird stuff about channeling, actual spirits. But what we cover is the supernatural and pop culture, and answering questions you may not have known you wanted to ask, like, why does Dracula wear a cape? How does the proton pack work? So we cover a lot of Ghostbusters stuff because that's just a very big passion of mine. And we found a lot of other fans that have really responded to, some of our videos. So it's an exciting thing. We started, we're coming up on our 4th year, April of next year. So we've been doing it for a little bit. Ghostbusters Afterlife is definitely going to re-energize and probably have to update some videos because, we've had, so far, this is how we know the PKE meter works. There might be some new features that we need to update with. So it's an exciting time for us, but it's probably going to be a lot of work for our channel. So it's something that I love to do. And, hopefully it's got people scratching their heads about, could we build some of that equipment ourselves?
I tell you, so I've been and watched all the videos. I watched them all. It was one of those where I was like, okay, I'll watch them over a couple of days. But they're all quite short. They're all very succinct, very concise. I don't think there's anyone really longer than 15 minutes, which is perfect. Bang through.
Yeah, we try and keep. There's a lot that you can get into. There's a lot you can go through, and it can get heavy. So we try and keep it, concise, but also getting to some interesting stuff.
Oh yeah, no, I loved them. I banged through them. They were great. Like I really do. The history, like laying out the chronology of the film, and actually, because especially for your when you did like the chronology or the history of like what's happening before and during Ghostbusters, and then did the same thing for Ghostbusters 2. It sort of answered some questions for me because in my head I've always thought like, yeah, how long does that film cover? And then you actually had like dates. You're like, yeah, this happens on September 17th. And I'm like, wow, like fine, that's awesome. Proper decent research. The one that blew my mind and I loved was, well, there's two of them. What route did Stay Puft take and what route did Vince Clortho take? That was excellent. I really enjoyed those videos. They were great.
What we try to do, and I like headcanon. I think everybody's got their headcanon, but I try and, really give as much substantial evidence and not try and, there's always going to be a room of, hey, this is just what I think, this is the date in my mind, but try and give, some real basis of, hey, there's a lot of supplementary material that does point to, there's a logical conclusion that, yeah, Stay Puft may have started in the Hudson. So let's go from there.
Yeah.
So I'm glad you enjoyed them. Yeah,
no, they were great. I love the fact, like you say, you reference like the comics, but also like the novelizations and some, like minutiae of detail in the film. So yeah, I love that kind of stuff. Like that sort of rabbit holes I often disappear down, and main accord. So wonderful stuff. And there's a link down below in the notes. And so yeah, go check out Channeling Spirits on YouTube. But let's go back even further to your childhood then. So where did you come across Ghostbusters? And was it a big part? You talk about your brother and stuff, but was it a big part of your childhood?
Oh yeah. So I've been watching Ghostbusters since before I could remember. So, and I had to ask my brother because I was like, I can't remember when I started watching it because it's just kind of in that weird phase of memory and non-memory.
Yeah.
And according to him, he said, I remember when I was a little kid, it was probably 87, 88. And he was watching real Ghostbusters with my mom on the bed. And so I asked my mom, I was like, okay, well, like, why did you allow, this little kid to watch the show that can be kind of scary? And pretty much she's like, listen, I could tolerate it. And it was just something that we could watch together. So I put it on. And what's interesting is my parents really loved SNL. And my dad actually went to high school with John and Jim Belushi. So National Lampoon, SNL, that was a big thing for our family because my dad literally, grew up with one of them. So it was pretty exciting to, see. It was sad to, have John pass. And that's really, if you know the story of Ghostbusters, the ghost of Slimer is often, said to be Belushi. The character Venkman was supposed to be John. So it was sad, but to see a legacy of sorts of the Belushis kind of live on in a film that I love is exciting.
Yeah, it is. That's amazing. Was that same year? Was it in the same grade, or was it like was there a gap between your dad and the Belushis?
So John would have been a senior. My dad was a freshman. They were on the same football team. Jim Belushi actually asked out my aunt, and my late uncle was actually very good friends with Jim. Jim did, I think, K9 in the city of Chicago, and my uncle Dan would visit him on set. He did a play or two with Jim. So, we had a pretty close connection with the Belushis. My dad was much closer with John's wife eventually. So they were the same grade. Yeah.
True claim to fame there. That's like a massive pop culture claim to fame. So that's awesome. I like the fact that, like you say, that introduction through sort of like parents, especially sort of in the 80s, this idea of the cartoon the parents would tolerate. I had a very similar sort of experience. I was actually big into Transformers, and my dad was just not. He's like, no, these changing robots are ridiculous. I'm not dealing with that. And then, like I say, Ghostbusters becoming like, I can deal with this because I've seen the film. And so it's didn't introduce me to it, but I think, like you say, it was tolerable. So it's like, yeah, you can have this on. This is fine. And it obviously expands. But the real Ghostbusters is one of those amazing things. I think the real Ghostbusters seems to permeate through more so in some of the films. I said we were talking about stuff there. Like I spoke to Paul Gandon the other day, and he made a really good point that there's a generation that of the film, the first film, but then there's like a tag on to that of those slightly younger siblings or kids coming up that are actually introduced through the real Ghostbusters, and that's their gateway. That and obviously the toys.
Yeah. You know what's interesting, if you think about Ghostbusters as a concept, it's a very adult film. And by no means probably should this have been a cartoon. It's kind of like RoboCop and a couple of those, early 90s, 80s. You're like, why did that become a cartoon? But then if you think about the concept of, you have this ability to fight a paranormal enemy, that is very childish or childlike. And you can understand why kids latch on to that. I remember being terrified of the boogeyman in the real Ghostbusters, and that really kind of permeated my subconscious of like, this is what the boogeyman looks like. But it taught you that you had these tools and you could combat that. And that's kind of the exciting thing is, when you cosplay as Superman, you got to have a certain physique. If you don't quite match up to certain physical standards of Superman, someone's going to look at you and go, what are you doing? But Ghostbusters could be anybody. They're schlubby exterminators. They are meant to look like the everyman. So that's exciting as well.
It is, and it's one of the things I love most. I think it's one of the only fandoms. I think it does happen on a periphery of sort of like Star Wars and like Star Trek and maybe a couple of others, where you'll have those that sort of like cosplay as the direct characters, so they'll go as like Luke or Vader or whatever, or Kirk or Picard or whatever those things are, and then they have the outside where they're like, oh no, I'm just a Starfleet officer or Klingon or whatever. But with Ghostbusters, that it's literally become a thing where you're like, oh no one really does like the four. They're just like, oh, I'm a Ghostbuster. And as you've got like, what's the name? What name have you got? What name have you got in your flight suit?
Oh, mine's my last name, so it's
so
I got to customize.
So
and
that's,
most I have an Egon appearance, but I don't want to be Egon. I want to be me.
Exactly, and I absolutely adore that about the fandom. That like there's these franchises, and it's not just in the US. Like there's obviously I've seen them that you get them in, like you said Chicago and New York and New Hampshire. I've seen them all over the place. Long Island, I've seen, and then even in this country, not too far from me, is like the Staffordshire Ghostbusters, and there's the new I don't think that there's Newcastle has got one. Like there's a franchise, and one of the best things I love that they do is the No Ghost, which I'm wearing the No Ghost logo. The ghost sort of face and things obviously stays very similar, but all these guys have gone and made their own logos and the first guy Aidan I had on the month, the diabetic Ghostbuster, he's got a patch on Etsy, go check it out, for the diabetic Ghostbuster. I love how all encompassing as a fandom it is. It's amazing.
Yeah, and that's you're supposed to wear the classic No Ghost on the right, and then your franchise patch. I don't have one.
Yeah.
But that's kind of the all right, you're the greater Ghostbuster and then your local Ghostbuster. It's an exciting thing, and it's I know that the Firehouse, they'll collect like a huge thing of patches from all over the world, and it's a big thing, kind of designing and having your own franchise, and that it's permeating in so many different ways and affect people. It's an exciting time, and whether how this movie does, Ghostbusters will continue on to some degree because there's something intrinsic and exciting about just being able to lug that equipment and have those adventures.
Yeah, no, and this is the thing. So one of the things you mentioned, actually, I don't know, I want to get into this a little bit, is the videos you do, and you said about making the equipment, the stuff. You've obviously got your flight suit, you got the patch on with the name. Have you got like screen accurate pack, proton wand, PKE meter? Have you gone that far? So have you got like the full kit is what I'm asking.
Yeah, so actually right now I have my proton pack downstairs is disassembled because I'm upgrading it to the new Afterlife pack. Mm-hmm. So I'm, I had my, my pack that was kind of the generation 2 from the second movie. I'm disassembling it a bit to kind of update it to the latest pack, if you will, Phoebe's pack.
Yeah. Because
that's kind of the exciting thing is, again, you can kind of be whoever you want in your own, okay, well, I've got this pack from the latest movie, and, you can have this pack I've got a trap I built. I've got, a wonderful, it's called a belt gizmo done by Ecto Labs. If any, builders out there need a great belt gizmo, he does a wonderful job. Light sounds, it's amazing. So, and what's also nice is, you can invest a lot of money, just like, Star Wars and the 501st, or, there's a lot of more manageable financially packs. There's the Spirit Pack. So, I like to think that, and not every bit of the fandom is accepting, but I like to think that let's not have gatekeepers. Let's allow everybody to enjoy it, and whatever degree you want to commit, go ahead.
Yeah, no, I love that. It was funny because some of the conversations I've had online, just DMs and stuff while I've been doing this, and I was talking to a cosplayer and stuff, and he was doing something similar. Like, he was upgrading his pack and doing some bits, and he was saying he was going on like Reddit and Facebook, and he's checking other people are saying like, yeah, this is wire and it's this color and it does this and it's going to here, and I'm like, wow, that's a level of detail and attention to detail that's so impressive. It's a real commitment. I'm always impressed with cosplayers when they sort of see them, and the detail in the pack. It's just so fun, maybe one day there is the temptation. I'm not,
I mean, there, if you ever want to, reach out to the right people. There's definitely the wrong people to reach out to, but there's a Max Factory is kind of doing piece by piece, where you don't have to know the screws to it comes with the screws, comes with the Allen wrenches. There's some options out there, and I'd more than happy to help you out, or anyone, feel free. I'm on Twitter, on YouTube, reach out to me. I love helping up and comers, because when I was first building my pack a couple of years ago, there was gbfans.com forum, and there were some gatekeepers there, and it was sometimes hard to get some of that information of like, hey, how do I install this motherboard to the actual shell? And sometimes that's hard to get those that info out there. But I'm of the big belief, like, hey, let's help each other out, because at the end of the day, we're all just having fun, goofing off, busting ghosts.
Yeah, and like I say, the idea, the way that a fandom grows and continues to be successful is by welcoming anyone and everyone. That's fantastic. I will actually. I might take you up on that. I won't let my wife hear you, I'm saying that, but I may take you up on that.
I won't tell, but it's fun stuff. When you do kind of first boot that up with, if you go lights and sounds, when you have that, when you finally cross the right wires, and you're like, okay, you feel like that mad scientist that I'm sure Egon and Ray felt when they had that, like, successful test, boys.
Excellent. No, that's amazing. It's fantastic. What about other areas? Are you sort of into? You are literally at the moment drinking from a Ghostbusters 2 thermos mug, for the kids. And have you sort of, obviously we mentioned real Ghostbusters, but what about like the comics and everything from like, there was the Marvel and stuff in the 80s that was real Ghostbusters through to IDW stuff. Have you followed any of that? Do you follow the continuity in those ways?
When I was a little kid, I read the Marvel comics, and I had a few of those. I definitely followed IDW. Between you and me, I had the artist reach out to use some of my digital graphic design work. If you know the Ghostbusters Year One, there's an alternate cover collection where it's kind of looking at Janine's desk.
Yes.
A few of those items were based on some of my graphic design work. So Winston's check and the newspaper that he's looking at. I definitely follow the comics. I've reached out to Eric and Dan, and they're great guys. I'm saddened that they're not at the moment, still doing more stuff. I don't know if maybe they lost the license or they're just kind of letting it settle for a bit until Afterlife comes out. But yeah, I've read the comics. And were you a fan of them?
Oh, I love them. I absolutely love them. I've got the big hardbacks. I made sure I got. I think they're fantastic. I've got all the. It's one of those that sort of like it created the world building in the comics is so good, and it's one of those that sort of works on so many multiple layers where it's like, oh yeah, look, here's the jokes are up, or the action's up front, or the drama's up front, and you're following the Ghostbusters at the fort, and then they'll introduce the new characters. And obviously, there's all those legacy characters that sort of like they bring in, but the amount of background jokes and Easter eggs
When you're reading it, do you read it with the characters like voices?
It's an odd mix and match.
Because
Weirdly,
sometimes I feel like I'll hear like almost like the real Ghostbusters, like Lorenzo music.
Yeah,
But sometimes I'm like, oh, that's a very Bill Murray line. But often I'm reading in a character's voice, and I do think that Eric really matched up the voice of those characters.
spot on. Yeah, and I that's exactly what you've said. There is exactly how I feel. Like sometimes I'll read it, a story, and it'll feel like I'm hearing like Bill Murray or Dan Aykroyd, and then others I'm not. I'm hearing the real Ghostbusters version. Egon more so than Venkman. I feel very much sort of like that. Some of the tone and stuff I sort of get between the two. But yeah, I think it's fantastic. I've really enjoyed it. And again, like talking about how open it is, the crossovers have been so much fun. It's opened up to it gets real. They've had IDW and the real Ghostbusters, IDW and the 2016 Ghostbusters, and then they obviously crossed over with Ninja Turtles and Transformers, and it's all been,
for me, the Ninja Turtles, Ghostbusters. Those are two of my favorite franchises as a kid. To have them get together and to see that just kind of hilarity and fun was a match made in heaven. So yeah, I definitely check out if anybody's a passing fan and's got some interest, check it out. I would say it only gets better as it goes on.
Oh, definitely. And this is what I'm saying, but the world building, like the characters they introduced, are so good. It's so well done, and it honors the canon in the best possible way. Like the game is often considered canon, and I think people obviously sometimes debate that, but the comics consider it canon, and I love the fact that they don't name the rookie, like they just keep calling him like different things. So it's got these little things like that are just so they get it. But yeah, no, one of the things I was going to say is, you said, because it's I don't know what's going on at the moment. I've been trying to investigate it for a couple of months, because I have some of them hard copy. In fact, I got most, I think, got almost all of them hard copy, but I did also get them digital through Comixology. So that I can read them day in release. But they're not on there anymore. Like I've got the ones I've bought are still on my in my whatever, in my archive, in my collection.
But it's not available anymore to any.
Yeah, if you search Ghostbusters in Comixology, there is nothing in the IDW store. And so I've Googled online, and everyone else seems a bit confused. Like, yeah, they're not on. There's nothing on the Sony website to talk about it. There doesn't appear to be anything on the IDW website to talk about them. And there was going to be, apparently they were saying they were going to do something more, and then it just sort of went quiet. So I'm very curious as to, is it linked with Afterlife? And
I know Eric, the writer, has gone on to do Beast Wars. I know Dan is currently doing Godzilla, I think, with Eric. So both of them kind of moved on to other projects. Now, it's not to say that they couldn't come back, but right now it does seem like the franchise is taking a little bit of a pause. So, maybe we'll get some back.
Like
I did have a quick question for you. So, you're pretty familiar with the video game, the 2009 video game. Do you think, and this gets a little bit into speculation, so I don't want to go too hard, but do you think it still might be canon with Afterlife?
I
guess two-part question.
Yeah.
Do you want it to be, and do you think it is?
Yeah, all right. That's two different questions. Do I want it to be? Do you know what? I would like it all to be. However, I have a sneaking suspicion, and this is complete speculation. I know nothing, I have a sneaking suspicion this is a like a Halloween scenario. It's a sneaking Halloween scenario, as in we are going to have Ghostbusters, and then there's going to be multiple continuities. You can go Ghostbusters, Ghostbusters 2, Ghostbusters the video game, and then the comics if you want. Or you can have 2016 Ghostbusters, or you could just have Ghostbusters. I have a really weird sneaking suspicion Afterlife is Ghostbusters, Ghostbusters Afterlife. I'm not even sure Ghostbusters 2 is going to be in continuity anymore. Or if it is, they're going to
diminish it.
Yes.
That's fair.
Yeah, I don't know. What about you?
I love the video game so much. For me, by 2009, I had resigned that there's not going to be a Ghostbusters 3. The fact that Dan Aykroyd at the time had considered it canon, considered it the third film, I was satisfied. I was like, this completes the trilogy. So I love that game dearly. I would love it for it to be canon. Sadly, I don't think it is. I've watched, only snippets of trailers and such, so I don't have a very informed decision, but I could easily see it, to your point where, I think Jason Reitman's an amazing director. I think, he does a lot of wonderful service in this new film, but I don't know if he's going to bend over backwards to try and accommodate a video game that maybe not everyone has played. So I could easily see it, sadly, going through the wayside.
Yeah. But I think, you say going to the wayside. I think it's going to be one of those things of, it's all about the multiverse these days. It's all about the multiverse. I honestly think, it'll be choose your own adventure. Like, as I say, with Halloween, you can go straight through with Halloween 1, 2, forget 3, 4, 5, 6. Yeah, three is its own thing. And then you can say, well, actually, no, there's Halloween 1, 2, H2O, and then so on and so forth. Like, I think there's that continuity. If you want it to be in continuity, it may not work with Afterlife, but it works with the first two films. Like, that can be a continuity and so on and so forth.
Well, and that's what I honestly don't understand, why there is such frustration with franchises.
Yeah.
Because at the end of the day, if you enjoy Star Wars and you want to, in your own head, say there's only 3 films in Star Wars, that's it. No one's stopping you. But the idea to try and police that to others and say, no, you can't have this or that, that's just silly. There's going to be parts in any franchise that you're just not going to love, and that's fine. Nobody's asking you to love it. Somebody else may. So yeah, no one can take away that video game, and I'll always be able to enjoy it. And you can kind of exist in your own head and say, yeah, and in this multiverse, this world, it went this direction for this. They were out of business for decades, and now they're back. And that's the exciting part. It
is, and that's and that's the sort of thing it's going to be. And I'm hoping, I'm expecting. Now I'm speaking to you about it. Devin, is going to be what happened between Ghostbusters 2 and Ghostbusters Afterlife. Where there will be a video, I'm assuming. So I'll be sort of.
I will definitely. Breath. I'll be taking first viewing. I'm going to see it multiple times. I don't know about you. First viewing, I just want to enjoy. It's just taking in the spectacle. There'll be a couple viewings after that where I'm taking notes, just trying to be like, oh, okay, yeah, and a lot of dissection. But I'm very excited to update our videos and try and piece together maybe some puzzle pieces and Easter eggs, and hopefully not make too much of an assumption on, this is what I think happened between the two films, but try and have an educated guess, because that's what I enjoy doing is, trying to provide, a logical, hey, this makes sense because, not just because I want it to. Yeah.
No, I agree. I kind of like those things as well. That sort of, and that's what I like your videos when they do say, like, we're leaning on canon and soft, you refer to it as soft canon. Those things that are sort of on the periphery, but they make sense to be included. Like, they don't contradict the main canon. One of the things I was going to ask about as we go through is we've all got, and in your collection is I think will definitely be superior. We've all got these different bits and pieces in our collection, whether it be memorabilia or whatever. For your Ghostbusters thing, I don't mean to parade it out, but if you got like a crown jewel, if you got something that you're like, this is my cool little item, this is my little nugget.
That's a very good question. And, it's probably the pack that I'm building because of, the amount of effort. I decided a long time ago, and this speaks to people who have probably been wanting to build a pack for a while, way back in I'll say the dark ages, there's probably early 2000s, or when the internet was starting to be a thing. There were the old norm plans, which were done in like Microsoft Paint, and it was trying to piece together. You can still find them online in dark corners of like, okay, let's try and make a pack with almost no knowledge, almost no photos except for, VHS copies of how to build this pack. And since, then I've wanted to build a pack, and it's been, this gradual journey of, to see now we have people who literally have molds of the Spangler pack. We're getting to the point that it's no longer, I'm pretty sure this is what they use to make this. It's now we know, or we have the exact measurements of the pack. And I love that. I love being able to look at someone's pack and go, oh my gosh, I can appreciate you have genuine NyQuil wiring, tubing. That's amazing. I know what that costs you.
Yeah.
And then, I'm not, so much of, a snob to say like, oh, you don't have that, but to be able to recognize someone else's hard work. I went through a lot of effort, and I'm in the middle of building 2 other packs, just because it does become a little, once you start one, you always want to upgrade it. You always want to kind of do one better.
The itch is on, you're getting the itch. Oh, that's the thing. I know that's like.
I'd love to, say that, I have this signed by Dan Aykroyd or Ernie. My wife did a cameo though, or Ernie Hudson did a cameo for my birthday, and that was really amazing. Ernie did the flight suit, to address me by name. It was that was really special. So outside of a physical thing, to have Ernie address you and say, hey, you're a Ghostbuster, man, I was like, oh
man, that is awesome. He seems like, it's funny because like you see Ernie Hudson, and he's clearly got a passion for it, and he loves the fans, and like he's in conventions and he does those sorts of things. And then you watch the films, and I'm like, man, you got done short. Like, I so wish. Yeah. And this, we'll go into speculation in a minute, but that's one of the things I'm sort of like, I don't want to be a main character, but like, do Winston right,
if you're familiar with the original script, and we're talking about, way back when he was just, a much bigger character, there were only 3 Ghostbusters. He had all the best lines, and they slowly chipped away. He's the one who thought of, the Stay Puft Marshmallow Man because of campfires in North Carolina. He had all the best lines that were just slowly taken from him. And even by Ghostbusters 2, I thought they could have done a little bit more to maybe write that, and they didn't. So I'm hoping for one that Ernie gets, especially as, been a torchbearer of sorts of this franchise, give him something, give him a few more lines, give him a few more justice.
Yeah. Well, my understanding is that like the script he read for when he signed on, as you say, was like that original script, which I've also been told or advised it's like the one that was shown to Eddie Murphy when they were trying to sort of court him. Mm-hmm. And so the character he was signing on for was very different to the character that Winston became. And again, like I still love the character, like and Ernie is great in both films, but yeah, he needs something that's a little bit juicier. And I'm hoping they sort of, like you say, they do him right in the new film. So like you say, and he, his cameo in the 2016 Ghostbusters is actually, Bill gets probably the larger, but like I think Ernie's is it's a decent cameo, so it's rightfully so. But yeah, moving up then, we will sort of cover off. Let's cover a little bit of speculation then. We've talked about what we want to, a couple of things, but is there anything, and this isn't, not to go into too much, don't want spoilers or anything, but anything you'd want to see in Afterlife? What's the thing that you're sort of like?
That I've wrangled with this for a little bit, right? When I was a kid, even when I was a kid watching real Ghostbusters, I didn't care for the Kid Busters. I felt that was very evidently what it was. Yeah. And I don't care. Even when I was a kid watching, shows, I never needed that proxy of, the kids are being that character. I didn't need Robin to enjoy Batman. I like Batman. The power fantasy is that you get to be the adult. So when, I didn't have a visual reaction when, I heard that there were going to be predominantly younger, potentially Busters. And now that I'm a new father, I will say that I've definitely softened on that hard edge of like, I don't know how I feel about there being younger Busters, because as you said earlier, at some point the franchise is either going to be filled with a bunch of old men who only want to watch 2 movies, or it expands and younger audiences do get to enjoy that. And I am excited for that. I think from what limited I've seen, I do think that it looks good and doesn't look goofy. It doesn't look pandering.
Yeah, I think that's the key thing, isn't it? Is pandering. I mean, I've had others again in conversation, just friends and everybody saying, "Oh yeah, no, it looks more like a kids' film. It's got, it's going to be all about kids." And then I'm like, yeah, but have you seen Goonies or The Monster Squad or The Gate? Like, we can still have.
I love Stranger Things.
Yeah, Stranger Things. Like, you can still do these things and have an edge or have a tone. And so I'm, as you said, sort of like, I think Jason Reitman's a great director. Ivan Reitman is producing. For Bill Murray to actually come back, that gives it. I think that gives it a bit of weight.
For tone, how do you feel about the tone of kind of what you've seen? Do you think it's going to be a little bit more horror, a little bit more serious, a little bit more touching, a little bit more comedic? It's very hard to tell from limited footage.
Yeah, it's interesting because when I first saw it, I thought, oh, they're leaning into that, the more into sort of the action comedy. It's going to be that sort of like, there was very much sort of like the car screeching around the corner and giving it the what's it seat popping out. Okay, they're going to go for the thrills. I've got a problem with that. It looks good. And then you see the later trailer and you've got like, I don't spoil it for if you haven't seen the trailer, but like that, the zombie in the cafe. And I was like, oh, hang on. If they're willing, this sort of seems like a bit of a, they're telling us that they're going to go other places. This is a sort of, it's a nod for the first one because the zombie taxi driver, clearly get that, but it's a bit more of like, oh no, we are going to do something a little bit scary. Like we're going to try for those scares. So I'm hoping, I don't think I've seen anything in the trailer that screams, like true horror, but I'm hoping they'll go for something with a bit of edge. That's what I'm hoping.
Yeah, I think the brilliance, and there's a lot of brilliance to the first film, and I could go on a 3-hour tangent in and of that, but the wonderful nature of it's not confined to a specific genre. If you were to point at 10 different people and say, what is Ghostbusters? You might predominantly hear it's a comedy, but there are very horrific elements.
Oh, yeah.
And I think there's a wonderful interplay. And I think, comedy and horror both have a setup and a payoff.
Yes.
And there is both there's a twist, and at a dime, it can either become comedy or horror because it's that tension into that lead up. And that's where I think, dark comedies like, the 80s dark comedies, Gremlins, Ghostbusters, a lot of those were very brilliant, because they weren't so inhibited by, a rating system, but there was an interplay there. And I'm hoping there's some of that. I think some of the adult nature is going to be probably not present in this one. There might be maybe a few jokes for mom and dad, but I don't think it's going to lean too much into that. This does seem to be a little bit of a love letter, both to Ivan Reitman and Jason has said to his daughter, who I believe is McKenna Grace's age. So it's very clear that, having a female protagonist of sorts, is definitely seeming like, hey, this is a little bit of a nod to her. I enjoy that familial motif that is, metatextual as well as textual. I think that's exciting, but I'm hoping it's a lot of well put together genres that mingle together.
Yeah, I agree. It's a melting pot of different bits and pieces. One of the things that came across, especially that first trailer, and again, I think it comes from Jason Reitman being a similar age to us, and that sort of like that generational gap, is there felt like there's the Reitman influence because obviously it's a Ghostbusters thing. He's got the Ivan Reitman on his shoulder as producer. There's a Spielberg feel to this idea that the family dynamic and you know, coming down to a small town, you know, family. And so I'm thinking, okay, if he's got that touch as well, you know, he's going for that sort of Spielbergian heart, you know, it doesn't have to be schmaltzy, not sort of like saccharine, but like that little bit of heart, then yeah, great. Like it'll make the, you know, it makes the drama a bit more punchy and that sort of thing. So I think a melting pot would be, well, yeah, like you say, if done right, you know. But yeah, no, and this is why I'm nervous. This is why I sort of like, you know, when you speculate about it, I'm sitting there going, yeah, that'd be this, that'd be that. And in my head, I'm like, I've heard, and again, this is probably the circles I'm, you know, that like people like you and I traverse in, is predominantly positive. Like, you know, not spoilers, but people saying like it's good, it does what it's supposed to do. It's, you know, Ghostbusters fans are going to love it. You know, it's a real sort of like a gateway to the next generation. So I'm hearing mostly good things, and so I'm going in positive, but I'm trying to sort of temper that as well, which.
I think though it has a good pedigree. You know, if Jason Reitman was not a very solid director in his own right, and he had not done a series of films, several very successful films that have their own voice, I would be a little bit more worried. Yeah. If all of a sudden they just tapped Ivan Reitman's son because Ivan Reitman's son, you know, in the same way as like, oh, we'll have Bill Murray's, you know, son. No, it has to have its own warrant. Yeah. And for a while, I know Jason was like, I don't want to do Ghostbusters. It's not for me. And it wasn't until he had a story to tell. And, you know, all the 2016 aside, I think that this is a good, I mean, I would say it's a good moment to have it. I think last year would have been a great time to have it. But, you know, all of that aside, you know, I think it's the right director. I hope it's the right script. I think, you know, technology has advanced, so, you know, it's in a good place, and I'm excited for it. I really am. I'm trying not to worry too much about it. I'm trying not to think too much about, you know, what I want it to be, and just let it be itself.
Yeah, no, that's a good point. Like, let it be its own thing and enjoy it for that. Okay, the one final question around speculation, and then we'll move on to sort of the last question. What do you want this to mean for the franchise? And by that, I mean sort of like, you know, I'm thinking like, you know, more comics, more cartoons, like widening the franchise with more films. What would you want to see?
So, and this goes back to a very personal level, and this is where I really connect with Jason. Is I have an 8-month-old daughter, and I would love, and I'm not going to force anything upon her, but I would love for her, you know, who is about at, you know, a young age, to be, you know, introduced into a franchise that I love, and to be able to have that connection, you know, in the same way that my mom sat in a bed watching the real Ghostbusters with my brother, that there's a parental and, you know, child connection, to have that with my daughter, and to her to be able to see Phoebe and McKenna Grace, and to not be maybe bogged down by, you know, only old men can be Ghostbusters. And I know there's some fans who strongly disagree with that, but I really hope as a parent for her to be able to have that figure and want to have that, you know, connection, because that's exciting to me. It's an exciting thing to share, you know, not just with peers and friends, but also be able to share that on a level of being able to pass the torch myself. So for me, I want it to be something that she can enjoy. I want to enjoy it. If I don't, and it's not my favorite thing, it goes back to choose your own adventure. I can end it with the video game. I can end it with Ghostbusters 2, the real Ghostbusters, the comic. I hope there are more comics. Yeah. I hope, you know, there's more excitement in the build community to say, okay, well, now we got to build the RTV. You know, what wheels are they using? That's exciting for me, because Lord knows I have enough things to build, but it's always good to have more stuff. Yeah. So it's already been exciting for me, you know, to be able to get some Stay Puft marshmallows, and yeah, it's been fun.
No, I agree. There's so much potential. I always think there's so much potential. And one of the most disappointing things for me, and you said about there being droughts within the franchise now across the years, is I sat, you know, as I've grown up and I've, you know, I'm gracefully meeting in my middle age, I look back and I think, like, there's been multiple iterations of the Transformers cartoons. Like, I love that Gen 1 first generation cartoon. I absolutely adore it. Same with Ninja Turtles. Like, there's been multiple iterations of the Ninja Turtles. He-Man's even had, like, multiple iterations. My Little Pony.
They've got like 2 cartoons right now.
Yeah, My Little Pony has had like multiple generations and different things.
Yeah.
And it all fits those different people. And that's wonderful. And then I'm like, excuse me.
Where's our turn?
Where's our cartoon? Like, we had the real Ghostbusters, the extreme Ghostbusters, and then it sort of stopped. And I was like, it feels like the time now for, like, for that to happen. I'd love to see like a real Ghostbusters revival cartoon or something. Not with the animation. Do what you want to do, but just bring back a cartoon for them.
Do you think that has to do with the fact that it's hard to separate Peter Venkman, the character, from Bill Murray, or any of those very iconic performances? That it's very, that there's always a judgment of like, oh, well, they don't sound or they don't act like that. The same way we're talking about the IDW comic, it does a very good job getting that voice correct, because that's so intrinsic to Ghostbusters.
It's the voice, but this again comes back to, take the Ninja Turtles. Like, the Ninja Turtles have had multiple iterations. You could use Transformers, but let's use the Turtles because there's 4 of them. Raphael, and the film is its own thing, but like, after a while, like Raphael, Leonardo, Michelangelo, Donatello, independent personality. They've all got that, but there's a core to them. There's like a sense of like, I could even just quote the theme tune from the first cartoon, but like Raphael he's the sort of like, he's the grumpy one. He's the sort of the impulsive one. And then so Leonardo's always trying to keep order. He wants to be the leader. He wants to be the best. And Michelangelo's the party dude. I think you could do that, reboot, rebrand, or update, but then you go back and you go, okay, well, we know that Peter is this, Egon is this. You keep that sense in the same way that the IDW cartoon comics have done it. If anything, sometimes I read that comic and I'm like, I love this comic. It could be a storyboard. Like, why is this not animated? Like, put this on a screen. I think you could do it really well. It baffles me as to why it's not happened. But
I hopefully coming soon.
Yes. Well, it was announced, was it very, very recently, that there is news that there's going to be a show, a Ghostbusters TV show.
I've heard so many whispers through the years. I remember when 2016 was happening, there was Dan Aykroyd saying there's going to be a whole universe. We're going to have an animated show, and a guy's only Ghostbusters, and they're going to intermingle with the girls' Ghostbusters. And I guess I'll believe it when it's a little bit more tangible. When I do see that trailer, that okay, it's announced, it's happening.
When that drops, I will. I'll be very very excited. To be part of Ghost Corps. I mean, that's the dream, isn't it? I'd love to see what goes on in those hallowed halls or somewhere when they talk about these things. Anyway, we've been talking for long enough, and I appreciate your time, and it's getting on. So we've talked about your fandom, we've talked about everything else, but before we go, though, there is a final question. Do you believe in ghosts?
I do. I've actually encountered a few, so it really kind of depends on what story you want to hear. Whether you want to hear about the Hat Man, my best friend who lived across from a graveyard, or our current house. Choose one of the 3. I'll try and keep it to one.
Keeping me on the choose my own adventure.
Yeah.
To Hat Man, because the Hat Man is a recognized, one of those sort of supernatural entities I think people recognize. So tell me about your encounter with the Hat Man.
So, and for those not aware, the Hat Man it's no one's really sure what this entity is. It is a figure that is essentially a walking silhouette that appears in a fedora and a trench coat. And I was not aware of this was a paranormal entity. I didn't know anything about it. So just kind of keep that in mind. I was in high school. I happened to be staying up late. It was in July 2005, I think. And I had been watching a program on M. Night Shyamalan, and apparently it was like a mockumentary where essentially it was building some hype for some when he was still a bigger director,
Mm.
not quite as tarnished, we'll say, as in his later years. I enjoy it, but it was this idea that a lot of his films were based on his real life experiences, that he saw ghosts, that, you know, these, and I don't remember the name of it, but it kind of creeped me out. And it got me thinking, like, that's really weird. You know, what if you could see ghosts? And me personally, I think if you invite certain things into the world, and, you know, I think I was in the headspace of kind of inviting, if you will, paranormal supernatural experiences. I, you know, couldn't really sleep, got in bed, it's late at night. And the important thing is, from a weather standpoint, it hadn't rained, and that comes into play later. So I'm sitting in bed, I can't really fall asleep, and I'm just staring out at a cross. And, you know, it's one of those, I don't remember where, you know, whether he just appeared, but all of a sudden there is this man in my room. It's dark, but, you know, your eyes have adjusted so I can see him very clearly. I see in his trench coat drops of water. And I remember thinking in my head, it didn't rain. Not it's, whoa, who the hell is this person? Why is he in my room? But that went through my head, like, that's really weird. And I remember I just kept trying to see his face, and I couldn't. And I was just kind of drawn into this void. And if you know how, you know, people feel, I could feel kind of a sinister smile without seeing it.
Mm-hmm.
And I knew intrinsically, this is bad. You know, if you have ever felt evil, that's the only way I can describe it. You know, I hazard to say people are ever evil, but I will say that whatever that thing was, it felt evil, and I didn't like it. And I was just paralyzed, whether it was fear, whether it was sleep paralysis, you call it what you will. And like in a movie, you know, I blinked, and all of a sudden he was just feet closer. And then he just kind of slowly crept up to me, and I just couldn't move. And I kept trying to stare at his face. I just, as if I could see his face, then I could recognize, then I could control this creature. And then his arm just crept up, and he just sunk it into my chest. And I just remember having this moment of terror, like he's trying to get inside me. And I just kept feeling that sinister smile without seeing it. And for whatever power that be, you know, after what felt like an eternity, I managed to just throw myself up out of my bed. I ran downstairs to our basement. I just turned on everything I could. I turned on every light. I turned on every lamp, the TV, anything. And at the base of the basement stairs, he's just standing there, just waiting for me at the threshold of the light. And it scared the shit out of me. And it was years later that I stumbled onto, oh yeah, I called him the Dark Man. Mm-hmm. And people report a very similar thing. This entity appears, he looks like this, he appears in bedrooms a lot of time, not always. Sometimes, you know, people are kind of in their beds, but that seems to be the predominant story. And that maybe freaked me out even more, is that this wasn't just me, that there may have been, it wasn't psychosis, you know, it was, whether it is sleep paralysis and there is a collective conscious where we all have this weird figure we imagine, is still weird in and of itself.
Oh yeah, no, I agree. I think the Hat Man as an entity is a fascinating sort of, like you say, is a whether it be a collective and unconscious kind of thing, or if it is a single or multiple entities or whatever it is, you know, interdimensional beings, people have said, all kinds of different pieces. It's fascinating that how this has come across. And it's not, and the thing to confirm, because, you know, I've read about these things, like, it's not just Western cultures. Like this figure has appeared like all over the world. So it's not like you go, oh, it can be associated with this thing in this culture. You go, no, it's appeared in, you know, like Japan and America. It's appeared in Britain and in Europe, Australia. Like, people have reported this everywhere. So it's absolutely fascinating. And I just want to say thank you very much. I'm going to bed after this. And so I'm now going to have to watch some cartoons just to chill myself out.
There's been many a nights when I've had to kind of mentally say, I'm not going to go down that road because I could invite something, and I'm not going to do that again. I've been there. So I pray that nobody has to encounter something like that. It's a very terrifying, at least in my experience, it was a very terrifying and dark thing. I do not think it's a spirit personally, so I wouldn't advise anyone calling or asking for that.
No, that's a fantastic story. I mean, it's legit creepy story, and I totally agree with this thing of if for good and bad. If you open yourself up to something, it becomes a bit like a beacon, or you can welcome in good just as well as you can welcome in bad. And sometimes I don't think we know we're doing it, and I think that's sort of you need to know those things. Anyway, but that Devin, that's been an absolute fantastic conversation, Stephen. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you for having me.
No, great, and I will take you on the offer at some point. I will definitely reach out about start to build the pack. I think it might be something I've been tempted for a while, so maybe I'll see how I can feel after Christmas. About new year, new challenge. But anyway, before we go, where can people find you? Where can people find Channeling Spirits?
We are most predominantly on YouTube. That's where you're going to find our videos. If you, like I said, just type in Channeling Spirits, you're probably going to find some weird stuff. But if you type in Channeling Spirits Ghostbusters, we're pretty quick to pop up. One of our most popular videos is How Does the Proton Pack Work, where we go over both the history and the physics. It's one of my personal favorites. So if you're looking for a place to start to see, do you like our style? Are you interested in some of the stuff we explore? It's a good place to start. We are on Twitter and Instagram, and we also have a Patreon. If you're looking to support us, you can get some behind the scenes information, what we're working on next. If you want to have some input and maybe say, hey, I'd be interested if you start exploring this. That's a good way to really kind of sway and connect with us and really support us as well.
Excellent. And all that, their YouTube channel and the Patreon in particular, and their Twitter handle is in the notes down below on your podcast catcher. So go check those out. And I do agree, like the videos are fantastic there, and not just your Ghostbusters one. Like I've started to explore now. You've got Beetlejuice, you've got Stranger Than Fiction, all kinds of different ones on there. So there's loads of good content on there. But ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for listening and continuing to join us on this Ghostbusters trip. If you like what we're doing, go to your podcast catcher and leave a review, preferably 5 stars, but any feedback is welcome. And more than that, if you really, really like what we're doing, we've got a Patreon too, www.patreon.com/20cg media. That's 20cg media. Go on there. We've got a weekly podcast where me and my partner, Julian Darius from Stories Out of Time and Space, are doing Trekking Through the Twilight Zone. Every episode of the Twilight Zone on a weekly basis. Every Tuesday, we drop a new trekking episode. And then I do a monthly one of 30-minute thoughts where someone asks me a question and I give my thoughts on it for 30 minutes. It's just a rambling load of fun. But ladies and gentlemen, go check it out. It's all very affordable and it helps us keep the lights on at 20th Century Towers. So anyway, Devin, it's been an absolute charming dream in having such a great Ghostbusters fan on the podcast. So
thank you so much. I had a wonderful time. I'd love to come back.
No, yeah, we will definitely have you back. And I'm going to do a bit of a collection, I think, of reactions to the film. So I might ask you to drop a couple of minutes reactions at some point, and we'll pop those out. But ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much, and we shall talk again soon.